In the dark of the night, U.S. senators helped themselves to a raise. And what could be the first look at an American hostage in 2 years. This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. The United States Senate responded today to growing public concern about contracting AIDS from doctors. The Senate voted to get tough with doctors and other healthcare workers who have AIDS and attempt to conceal it from their patients. CBS News correspondent Rita Braver has the story.
First, the Senate passed a controversial proposal by Senator Jesse Helms that would require a 10-year prison term for any healthcare worker who, knowing that he is infected with the AIDS virus, fails to inform patients and continues to treat them.
I don't think a 10-year sentence is severe when you compare what these people are willing to do to their innocent patients.
Helms was inspired by the story of Kimberly Burgalis, now near death from AIDS she's believed to have contracted from her dentist. Opponents called it an isolated case and accused Helms of creating hysteria that would backfire.
Are they going to go out and get the test? Of course not. Of course not. And they're going to continue to practice medicine and put the patients at greater risk. That's going to be the effect.
But the proposal passed 81 to 18. For some senators, that vote may have been a chance to look good with voters because the measure is not really expected to survive in the House. But the Senate went on to approve another health care measure that would require all states to adopt guidelines issued by the Center for Disease Control earlier this week. Healthcare workers who perform procedures where they could infect a patient are urged but not required to be tested for AIDS.
The recommendations provide that every effort be made to identify those procedures creating the greatest risk and direct that they either not be done by those who are infected or be done under limited circumstances with the patient's full knowledge.
This measure is given a much better chance of passage in the full Congress. But taken together, both proposals seem to have introduced a new era, with Congress considering restrictions on people with AIDS, Dan.
Rita, are there other restrictions under consideration?
Well, Senator Helms today said that he would also like to get passage of legislation that would protect healthcare workers. Now, that sounds an awful lot like some kind of requirement that prospective patients be tested too, and I think we are going to be hearing a whole lot more about this issue.
Rita Braver, live in our Washington Bureau. Thanks. Also, during the past 24 hours, the United States Senate took some action on a pocketbook issue. Correspondent Eric Ingberg has that story from Capitol Hill.
Evening on Capitol Hill. A time for mice to venture out of their holes and for the Senate to give itself a pay raise.
Senators voting in the affirmative: Akaka, Baucus, Biden.
It came like a runaway train about 9:30 last night, with no warning, no hearings, and little debate.
53 senators voting aye, 45 senators voting no. The amendment is agreed to.
Leaders of both parties pushed it through, raised $23,000. Elapsed time for the world's greatest deliberative body, an hour and a half. It raises senators to $125,000 a year. Trying to make this more palatable to voters, they'll give up the right to earn fees on the speaking circuit.
A salary increase for senators is a sound long-term investment in better government.
That is not a widely held view among voters.
In this current economy, I think it's a crime, absolute crime.
I don't think they deserve it any more than the average person on the street, and we're all starting to do without. I mean, they should listen to that.
Fearful public opinion might intrude, the Senate leaders struck at night after most news deadlines were safely passed.
They said that we did it in the middle of the night when no one was there. Well, if they weren't there, who the hell's fault was that?
What the senators in their furtive pre-midnight raid on the taxpayer told the American people last night was, look, if you can take it, grab it.
The raise passed 53 to 45. A convenient majority that had all the earmarks of a backroom deal sculpted to cover senatorial posteriors. Of the 53 yes votes, 45 came from senators who don't have to face the voters in '92. Only 8 senators up next year backed the raise. Ego also came into play. House members make more than senators, and so do dozens of House staff members who aren't even elected. For the millionaires club that is the Senate, it was just too much. Eric Ingberg, CBS News, Washington.
A photograph of the longest-held American hostage in Lebanon surfaced today. As correspondent Peter Van Sant reports, it was accompanied by new threats from his kidnappers.
This new picture of American hostage Terry Anderson, the first seen in 2 years, was released by his Beirut kidnappers today. It came with a warning of grave consequences if 2 terrorists now held in German prisons are not set free. Kidnapped in 1985, Anderson is the longest held hostage in Lebanon. His captors, the terrorist group Islamic Jihad, are demanding the release of the Hamadi brothers, jailed on kidnapping and murder charges.
Heavyweight 847, they are threatening to kill the passengers. They are threatening to kill the passengers. We must need fuel. We must get fuel.
Mohammed Ali Hamadi was one of the hijackers of the TWA jetliner in 1985. He's serving a life sentence for the murder of American sailor Robert Steedham. Abbas Hamadi is in prison for the kidnapping of 2 Germans in an attempt to free his brother. A stabbing incident on Monday involving Abbas apparently triggered this newest demand. The German government says it will not be pressured to free the terrorists. This latest threat to Terry Anderson's life comes at a time when U.S. officials were hoping victory in the Gulf War, as well as new peace initiatives in the region, would help win the release of the hostages.
It will only happen when the hostage holders and their sponsors, in this case the Iranians, conclude that there's no further purpose to be served by holding them. At that point, the hostages will be released. And that could happen within the next months.
Terry Anderson's sister says it does not look like a recent picture. And with reports that her brother is ill, it's extremely upsetting. Terry Anderson's fate, along with the other 5 American hostages held in Lebanon, remains unknown. Peter Van Sant, CBS News, London.
Secretary of State Baker announced in Damascus today that the United States and Syria have agreed on terms for a Middle East peace conference. Baker flew from London to nail down Syria's agreement, thereby putting more pressure on Israel to negotiate. Baker praised Syrian President Assad for what Baker called an important step. The conference plan calls for participation by a UN observer, a condition which Israel has rejected. President Bush is following up the economic summit in London with a trip to Greece and Turkey. Security is very tight. In Athens today, several thousand students staged violent protests against the Bush visit. The students set fires and clashed with Greek police. Some injuries are reported. President Bush addressed the Greek parliament during the day. He appealed to Greece and Turkey, 2 NATO allies, to end their long-reigning hatreds over the island of Cyprus.
Today I pledge that the United States will do whatever it can to help Greece, Turkey, and the Cypriots settle the Cyprus problem, and do so this year.
Back in London, Mikhail Gorbachev spent most of the day meeting with the British Prime Minister. John Major said the West is ready to join the Soviet leader in a, quote, partnership in perestroika. Major will go to Moscow later this year to check up on Gorbachev's efforts at a market economy. Still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, an environmental disaster on a California river. Also, an over-the-counter diet supplement and its victims. A first attempt was made today to deal with a huge toxic spill that has Californians fuming. The spill happened Sunday when a train derailed in the canyon of the Sacramento River in far northern California. It has spread about 50 miles downriver into Lake Shasta, California's largest reservoir. Correspondent John Blackstone has more on this ecological disaster.
Empty tank cars were moved into position today for the first attempt to pump the spilled pesticide out of the Sacramento River, a river already littered with thousands of dead fish. For 4 days, no attempt has been made to contain the 19,000-gallon spill, adding to the anger of residents already upset they've been getting little information.
They say everything's back to normal, but meanwhile, the EPA is down on our street taking air samples.
Officials have done little more than mark the pesticide with red dye to track its movement. Until now, they've described containment and cleanup as nearly impossible. The spill has been surrounded by confusion since the train jumped the tracks Sunday night and plunged into the river. The tanker carried no marking that it held toxic chemicals. The warning didn't go out until 10 hours after the spill. Dying plants along the riverbank show the effect of the chemical. It's an indiscriminate killer called metam-sodium. It's designed to be used against insects and weeds in the soil. In water, it can be even more lethal. There are unanswered questions about the effects on the entire food chain. And many local residents are not convinced by assurances the pesticide is no threat to humans.
I want to know about the people, not the business, not the river. Any answer? answers? I can't find any.
There is no question the economic health of the area is threatened. The pesticide has ruined a river famous as one of the best trout streams in California.
It's sickening to look at it, I'll tell you, because I'm a fisherman and I go fishing at least once a week, and it's gone now, that's all. Lord knows when it'll come back.
And the spill has tarnished the image of the area's main town, Dunsmuir, at the foot of Mount Shasta. The town has long attracted tourists by boasting the best water on Earth. So the town's Chamber of Commerce has launched the only real cleanup effort so far, trying to clean up Dunsmuir's reputation by demonstrating the town's spring water is unspoiled.
Thank you very much.
But the spill is now becoming a concern to millions more Californians as it flows into the huge Lake Shasta Reservoir, part of a system that supplies drinking water to 20 million people. Officials insist the pesticide amounts to no more than a grain of sugar in a cup of coffee, a reassurance many may find hard to swallow. John Blackstone, CBS News, Dunsmuir, California.
In Washington, a House panel heard horror stories today about what seemed like a harmless cure for insomnia and stress. Instead, as testimony recounted, it turned out to be both debilitating and sometimes even deadly. CBS News medical correspondent Edie Magnus reports.
Yeah, you thought you were taking something like Rice Krispies. You really thought you were. You thought you were taking something that was about as safe as it could be.
It wasn't safe. The L-tryptophan that Dorothy Wilson took to help her sleep was sold as a harmless amino acid diet supplement. Instead, it caused a brutal blood disorder called eosinophilia myalgia syndrome. 31 deaths were linked to EMS, and at least 1,500 people like Dorothy suffered permanent damage.
I'm irreversibly paralyzed from my knees down. I have weakness and paralysis throughout my body. I live in constant pain. I can't work.
Although most of the cases of EMS were traced to a contaminant in pills made by a single Japanese manufacturer, the FDA ordered all tryptophan off the shelves in March of 1990. But in fact, it can still be found at many health stores in compound amino acid pills, sold much like multivitamins. It has actually been illegal to sell these amino acids as dietary supplements since 1973.
If the FDA simply looked at the regulations that are in effect today and enforced them, they'd all be off the market because they're illegal to be out there.
On Capitol Hill today, the FDA complained that during the 70s, Congress and the courts were unsympathetic to its efforts to go after these pills. The agency defended its swift response to the tryptophan crisis and promised further action against other amino acids still out there.
This is a top priority of Dr. Kessler's, and he has asked for an answer from this task force, a recommendation this fall.
Little comfort, however, to those who testified about the devastating effect L-tryptophan has already had on their lives.
The wheels of justice must turn, but at the moment, all is buried in the mud of obscurity. I sit before you helpless, broke, alone, and in unyielding, relentless pain.
Victims of EMS today urge that all amino acids be classified and regulated as drugs. That, they say, would provide some measure of safety. Each bottle would have an insert telling you how much to take and if there's any medication that you shouldn't take them with and whether it's actually bad for certain people. Now you just go to the store and you pick up a bottle as we did. And this one, by the way, Dan, says right on the label that it contains L-tryptophan.
Edie, I want to make sure I understand. Are amino acids themselves unsafe?
Not necessarily. Sometimes they can be safe. The point is that you really don't know what you're getting. For instance, no one apparently knew that this Japanese company changed its manufacturing process, and that's what created the contaminant, which is believed to be the cause of all the L-tryptophan deaths and injuries. The argument that is made today is that if these were classified as drugs, there would simply be more control over the manufacturing and the labeling of all amino acids.
Edie Magnus, live at our Washington Bureau. Thanks. Coming up next, Vietnam now says it knows what happened to one of the MIAs in this photograph. The government of Yugoslavia is reportedly ordering federal troops to withdraw from the breakaway Republic of Slovenia. That word came tonight after a crisis meeting of Yugoslavia's collective presidency. Nothing has been said about federal troops in the other rebel republic, Croatia. Contradictions are multiplying about the photograph that allegedly shows 3 American servicemen listed as missing in action in Indochina. CBS News Defense Department correspondent David Martin has the latest.
Vietnam says Colonel John Robertson, one of 3 missing American pilots purportedly shown in this mystery photo, is dead. According to the Vietnamese, his remains were turned over to the U.S. more than a year ago. That would seem to call into question the validity of the photo. But in this never-ending tragedy, nothing is ever settled. American experts have been unable to confirm that the remains are in fact Robertson's.
In this specific case, we have never made a positive identification of the individual that Vietnam says they've identified. They say it's one of those 3 people in the picture. We have never made that determination.
In the late 1980s, a joint U.S.-Vietnamese investigation of the site where Robertson's jet crashed turned up eyewitnesses who said the pilot went down with his plane. Pentagon officials believe Robertson and the other 2 men are dead.
I am positive that's my husband.
But their relatives are so sure that's them, the case is being reopened.
We're treating it very seriously because the family members in question feel so strongly that the picture is images of their relatives. That's good enough for us to take it very seriously, and we are doing so.
A widow's certainty is indeed compelling. But the fact is that since the photo appeared in newspapers and on television, 3 other families have called the Pentagon saying that's their relative in the photo. David Martin, CBS News, the Pentagon.
Donald Trump today turned down an offer that would have eased his growing debt. He said no to a $165 million bid from Hilton Hotels for the Trump Castle Casino in Atlantic City, New Jersey. This came a day after Trump's Taj Mahal, also in Atlantic City, filed for bankruptcy, Trump's first ever Chapter 11 filing. When we come back, Eye on America. Tonight, why retirees say Green Acres is the place to be. Right now, couples all over America are planning their retirement, or at least dreaming about it, packing it in and packing up. But where are they going? David Dow reports tonight's Eye on America. Golden Agers heading for greener pastures.
Frank Konopka says he has mowed his last suburban lawn, fought his last commuter traffic jam.
Most of the people I know in my age group always has a story. I wish. I'm tired of wishing. I'm doing.
Konopka and wife Lavinia have bid goodbye to the New York metropolitan area. Hello to Chewelah, Washington. Population 2,000.
Chewelah has just the right amount of stoplights. I'd say 2. If it's the right number of people with the right amount of space.
The Konopkas have joined one of the nation's fastest growing migrations. Retirees who bypass traditional retirement capitals for quiet enclaves in rural America.
People don't need sunshine every day, and they do like to have an environment where they're comfortable, where they can leave their house unlocked when they go to the grocery store. And those conditions still exist in small communities.
Hundreds of small towns facing economic stagnation have been quick to climb aboard the gray wave. Tucked in an emerald valley 50 miles from the nearest interstate highway, Chewelah hasn't had much luck lately in attracting industry. But senior citizens are a different story.
There's a new hospital, state-of-the-art building with modern surgical facilities.
Wooed by a community home video and a marketing campaign, 20 couples have moved here in recent months, a bigger number than it sounds.
We figure that they're bringing in an average of approximately $300,000 in assets apiece to the community. That's approximately $7 million. The whole city budget in Chewelah is a little over $2 million. Significant impact.
Personal check will be fine as long as they're...
Retirees with their pensions and savings have rescued Battlement Mesa, Colorado from the demise of the oil shale industry. And the success stories travel fast to other small towns wanting a piece of the action. Action that stays home and shuns big city malls.
Instead of going to Spokane, they will stay here and spend their money here in town.
And you can feel that here.
We feel it at this store, we really do.
The retirees like the economics too. Golfing buff Bud Gaines moved here from California and built a 3-bedroom home on the 17th fairway for about $65,000.
What would that cost you in some of the other places you looked at?
Oh, $150,000, $200,000.
Many are attracted by the same small-town atmosphere they fled in their youth. For others, it's a peaceful backlash against the congestion that has now spread to more popular retirement spas.
We checked Arizona, we checked California, we checked all over, and this is where we settled down.
Here you go, kid.
Meanwhile, the Konopkas think it's time to celebrate being trendsetters.
Whoa, very good. I am impressed.
And what better place to celebrate, they ask, than the 24 acres where they'll build a log cabin, defy old trends, and retire to rural America.
We hope that in time we'll prove to the community that we're assets. We intend to become part of their community. I didn't come here to bring New York here.
Nor are they likely to find it. David Dow, CBS News, Chewelah, Washington.
And that's part of our world tonight. Dan Rather for the CBS Evening News. See you tomorrow. Good night.